Welcome back to Outside Views, and today we need to talk about political fantasy versus cold, hard international reality. Nigel Farage and his Reform Party have announced a proposal to scrap welfare benefit access for EU nationals living in the UK under the EU settlement scheme, or EUSS. And my personal view is that this is not a serious policy proposal. It's a piece of cynical, destructive political theater designed solely to inflame anti-immigrant sentiment and deliberately disregard the rule of law. The entire premise of this policy is built on a fundamental and frankly dangerous misunderstanding of the UK's international commitments and the economic reality of the workers being targeted. And this is a policy that is not just half-baked, it's an attempt to unilaterally breach an international treaty, and the consequences would be swift, devastating, and entirely predictable once more. And the core issue lies in the withdrawal agreement, the international treaty negotiated and signed by the UK and the EU to govern the terms of Brexit. Part 2 of that agreement is a sacrosanct firewall that preserves the rights that EU citizens had before Brexit, and that absolutely includes access to benefits like universal credit. And this protection is implemented through the EU settlement scheme. Citizens with settled status who lived in the UK for 5 years before Brexit have an automatic right to reside and therefore to access welfare benefits, simply needing to prove they are habitually resident. And those with pre-settled status who have lived there for less than 5 years before Brexit must have additional requirements, often proving they are in work. And the data is unambiguous. In June 2025, 9.7% of all universal credit claimants were people with status under the EUSS. But here's the crucial fact that the Farage camp deliberately ignores. These individuals are actually the foreign national group most likely to be both in work and claiming universal credit. And what does that mean in reality? It means that these EU citizens are predominantly working in low-paid essential sectors. And we're talking about care workers, factory staff, and agricultural laborers. And they are using universal credit to top up their low wages. And their labor ensures essential services continue and that you have cheap food on the shelves, a cost that is effectively subsidized by the taxpayer through low wages and welfare top-ups. So instead of addressing the structural problem of low pay and atypical work contracts that relies on the welfare system to subsidize business profits, Reform's policy proposal is simply to punish the workers keeping the system running. And the political motivation is clear. Exploit the fact that EUSS holders are a significant percentage of foreign nationals on universal credits to create a headline about benefit scroungers. But the consequences of this profound action are what truly expose its recklessness. If a future government were to unilaterally terminate the right to benefits for those under the EUSS, this would be a direct, undeniable breach of the withdrawal agreement. The EU would immediately initiate proceeding under the withdrawal agreement's dispute settlement mechanism. And this would start with attempts at resolution via the Joint Committee, but if the UK persists, it moves quickly to an arbitration panel. And if that panel finds against the UK, which it absolutely would, since the withdrawal agreement guarantees these rights, and the UK still refuses to comply, the EU has the authority to impose temporary remedies for non-compliance. And these remedies include initially a lump sum or penalty payment. But if the UK continues to stonewall, the EU could then, and this is the nuclear option, suspend some of its obligations under the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA. And this means the EU could impose tariffs on the UK, specifically targeting UK exports where it hurts the most. Farage has claimed that two can play that game and that the UK can retaliate with tariffs, but the reality is that the EU, as a vast single market, is a master at imposing targeted punitive tariffs, and the UK's battered economy would be crushed by the ensuing trade war. The EU could even argue that the UK is acting in bad faith by deliberately breaching a fundamental aspect of the withdrawal agreement, given them grounds to terminate the entire TCA. And the result would be a devastating no-deal Brexit in all but name, collapsing all trade arrangements and throwing the UK economy into a total tailspin. And Farage always said he wants a total Brexit, but if he wants that, yeah, right. Farage and his party know the legal risks, which is why he has attempted to pivot, saying he would simply look to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement. Why do I get some Delulu alarm here? Because this is pure delusion, and it demonstrates a complete lack of understanding how international treaties work. The rights of citizens are an essential element of the withdrawal agreement, and the legal powers to make such major changes to those elements have already expired. And even if the powers hadn't expired, why would the EU, whose member states already have concerns about their citizens being treated fairly, ever agree to limit the rights they spent years fighting to protect? They would not. And furthermore, any reduction in rights would be reciprocal. If welfare benefits are refused to EU citizens in the UK, they would also be refused to the approximately 1.2 million UK citizens living in the EU. Around 460,000 of these British citizens are over 65, many of whom are retired and rely, or will soon rely, on social assistance in their EU home countries. And this policy would not just be an attack on essential EU workers in the UK, it would be a cruel and direct attack on hundreds of thousands of British pensioners who made their homes on the continent. The entire proposal is a reckless performative act that threatens to breach an international treaty, start a trade war, and punish the most vulnerable people, both EU workers and UK pensioners, all for a single inflammatory headline. The only rational, efficient way to address the number of people on universal credit is to raise low wages and improve work contracts so that essential workers are not forced to rely on taxpayer funds just to make ends meet. Anything else is just a distraction from the real economic failures of the country. But we know Nigel Farage is really good in distracting. And if you want to see another video right now, the next one is right here in the end screen.